Hi, this is Alessio. Hope you're well, and welcome to a brand new update on Bitcoin. In this video, I have a very important chart of Bitcoin that I want to show you, and I want to explain to you the significance of this important chart with relation to the cryptocurrency today. Now, before we take a look at that chart, let me first of all bring to your attention what's been happening on Bitcoin over the last few weeks. So as you probably know by now, Bitcoin's rally has been fantastic. And in fact, we can see that after we broke that channel, that important regression channel there, we actually also touched the 200-day moving average there, had a bit of a correction. And in fact, so far in the last few days, in fact, you can see that Bitcoin has just managed to make another fresh attempt, a new attempt to get above the 200 daily moving average. So far, so good. However, there is something I need to bring to your attention. Some of you said to me over the last few weeks, you said that, hang on a second, Alessio, haven't people been getting extremely optimistic on Bitcoin recently? I mean, it's true. As Bitcoin did surge higher recently, you might have noticed that the level of optimism, or shall we say bullishness, among the public or among traders in general became actually quite high. In fact, it rose quite recently. In fact, let me show you precisely how that happened. This chart over here is courtesy of Jason Geppert of Sentiment Trader, and I want to bring to your attention something that happened recently. On January 14th, as Bitcoin surged higher, you can see exactly what happened here. Bitcoin hit a fresh optimism, extreme optimism reading here on this particular data. Again, just to recap, this data shows the sentiment of the public and of traders in general with regards to Bitcoin. Again, as I'm sure you know, sentiment at extremes can be used as a contrarian indicator. So extreme optimism can be actually a bearish signal, and extreme pessimism can be often a bullish signal. By the way, sometimes this chart is often referred to as the dumb money chart. Dumb money not meaning stupid, but just means the opposite of smart money. So in other words, by dumb money, we're talking about the retail crowd, the non-institutional crowd. So what's happened recently is this. As Bitcoin surged higher, let me just show you that one more time. As Bitcoin surged higher in January, so what happened was that the levels of optimism or extreme optimism began also to rise, as shown to us by this data. In fact, you can see what happened. On January 14th, Bitcoin, as a matter of fact, hit extreme optimism on the sentiment readings on this chart. Now, you might be asking yourself, what does that mean? What could this mean for the future? Here's something extremely important I want to share with you. You see, guys, on previous occasions when this signal has occurred, whenever we've reached extreme optimism here on Bitcoin, look at this. This was back in October. When Bitcoin hit an extreme optimism reading back in late October, in fact, as you saw that huge price surge that occurred, let me just show you that over here. There it is. As you will see right there on the left-hand side, when Bitcoin surged higher and hit that resistance right about here, Bitcoin also reached an extreme optimism reading here on this chart. That's shown to us here. Actually went above the red line. It went above the extreme optimism reading here. Notice what happened to Bitcoin soon afterwards. Pretty much about a week or so later, it dropped quite heavily, as we know, as we can see here. Look what happened back in August of last year. Again, optimism reading, extreme optimism reading, I should say. Again, acting as a contrarian indicator on the price of Bitcoin. And look what happened to Bitcoin prices soon afterwards. It dropped quite significantly. Same thing happened back also in July of last year. Extreme optimism reading here. And then soon afterwards, price of Bitcoin dropped. Let me show you some more examples. This is from 2018, about a couple of years back. So again, notice this. Bitcoin prices rose and then hit an extreme optimism reading. In fact, you can see hit it twice. But on this second time that it hit this level, Bitcoin prices soon afterwards dropped. Here's another one in April of 2018. Hit extreme optimism. Bitcoin, as a matter of fact, about a few weeks afterwards, dropped quite significantly. The same thing happened also in February of 2018. Extreme optimism reading, and then pretty soon afterwards, about a few weeks afterwards, dropped quite significantly. Now, I know you might be thinking at this point, so does this mean that Bitcoin could be about to drop? No, not necessarily. You see, guys, it is true that Bitcoin did reach an extreme optimism reading just recently in the last few weeks. So you might be thinking at this point, well, surely that means, based on the facts, based on the statistics, that Bitcoin could be due for another drop like we've seen before. However, guys, here's the good news. There is one exception to this rule. You see, let's just show you this. There is only one exception to this rule where extreme optimism acts as a contrarian indicator. And that is at the start of a bull market. Let me show you an example. In April of last year, you may recall that I was skeptical of the rally in the price of Bitcoin when it hit 5K. So as Bitcoin jumped from 3K to 4K to 5K, it hit the extreme optimism reading. For the same reason I just mentioned to you, because often this is a contrarian indicator. However, this is an important lesson we've learned about Bitcoin and actually most markets, which is that there is one time when Bitcoin ignores the extreme optimism reading, and that is at the start of a bull market, or actually in the initial stages of a bull market. So it is true, guys, that recently, as Bitcoin prices surged, it is true that round about here, we hit extreme optimism shown to us by the sentiment readings. We did reach an extreme optimism reading here. So you might think, well, that's a contrarian indicator. However, guys, if Bitcoin chooses to ignore that extreme optimism reading, which it has done, by the way, look at this. Bitcoin only dropped a small little correction, a small little pullback, hardly a correction, in fact, just a small little pullback to the 21 average. And now you can see it's almost back above, actually it is above the 200 daily moving average again. So Bitcoin has chosen to ignore the extreme optimism reading that we had here around about this area. And that is huge information. Let me just show you one more time this chart. Let's go back to 2019. Here it is. You see, guys, last year in 2019, in April of last year, when Bitcoin jumped to 5K and hit an extreme optimism reading here, Bitcoin chose to ignore this extreme optimism reading. In fact, Bitcoin just shrugged its shoulders saying, you know what, I don't care. I'm going to go higher. Notice what it did. It went sideways for a while and then boom, it jumped higher. Went up to, in fact, 6K, 7K, and 8K. In fact, notice again, we had another extreme optimism reading here. And again, only dropped a small little bit, and then sideways, and then jumped up again. So Bitcoin, a number of times in 2019, in early 2019, last year, it decided to ignore the extreme optimism reading. Now, again, some of the trolls who hate technical analysis, who sometimes comment on my videos and say, oh, there you go, guys. That means technical analysis does not work. Those guys who say that are lazy because they don't think. This is information. Think about it, guys. Why would Bitcoin choose to ignore the extreme optimism reading? Isn't that information? It is huge information. When Bitcoin chooses to ignore the extreme optimism readings, it means we're probably, or very likely, at the start of a bull market, of another bull market in Bitcoin. That is exactly why Bitcoin chose to ignore the optimism readings, the extreme optimism readings in 2019. It was giving us information that there is a reason why Bitcoin is ignoring that signal, because we could be at the start of a major bullish rally in the price of Bitcoin. So guys, that means this. Let's just go back to this one more time. We just hit an extreme optimism reading here, as you can see, in mid-January. Bitcoin so far has chosen to ignore that signal. We only had a very small drop. That is giving us, I believe, that is information. It could be telling us with a high probability that we are at the start of another bullish rally like the one we saw last year in 2019. Because essentially Bitcoin is ignoring the optimism, the extreme optimism readings. However, guys, I don't want to get ahead of myself because there's one proviso, one tiny little glitch I want to bring to your attention. I have noticed this on some of these charts, which is this. Notice that sometimes after you get an extreme optimism reading, like the one in October, Bitcoin doesn't automatically drop immediately. Usually it bounces a little bit before dropping. In fact, it happened in October, happened also, if I'm not mistaken, let's go back to 2018. Take a look at this over here. In 2018, we had a very similar situation. We had one extreme optimism reading here, then Bitcoin ignores the first signal, makes another bounce higher, and then on the second reading, it then drops. Happened also, I think, maybe you might say April 2018, but look over here, April 2018, extreme optimism. It doesn't drop immediately, has another bounce higher, and then drops, okay? And the same thing happened, as a matter of fact, in February of 18. There it is. We had an extreme optimism reading here, and then makes a bounce, quite a strong bounce, as a matter of fact, and then drops on the second sort of bounce. So guys, what that is telling us is we shouldn't get complacent, because yes, we did hit an extreme optimism reading recently, and so far Bitcoin has chosen to ignore it by the looks of it. But we've got to be careful here, because what if this is one of those bounces that we just saw a few minutes ago? So we hit an extreme optimism reading around about here, a tiny little drop, a bounce, If this is the start of a bull market, which I think it is, I personally think we are the start of a bull market. But if this is the start of a bull market, then we need to see follow through. We should not see Bitcoin falling apart at this point. Okay? That is the one thing I just want to make sure we mention as a caution. Never get complacent, never get too comfortable with regards any chart or any market. So yes, so far Bitcoin has chosen to ignore the extreme optimism reading that we hit recently. That could mean that we're the start of a potential bull market like we had in 2019. But just remember, sometimes we often get a little pullback followed by a bounce and then suddenly a drop lower. That must not happen if this is a bull market. So what I'm saying here, guys, is this. I'm hoping that's not going to happen here on Bitcoin. But hope is not a strategy. So what I am saying is this. If this is a start of a bull market, which I think it is, I actually think potentially this could be the start of a major move higher. But for that to be true, we need to see follow through. We need to see Bitcoin now pushing continuously higher. We need to see momentum pushing this higher above the highs we made in January, in mid-January. All right? If that's a bull market. The one thing that must not happen is a failed rally, which means this low here, the Bitcoin made, the lows of January, are now going to be very important. We must not fall below the lows of January. If Bitcoin does this, if Bitcoin, instead of making any moves higher, instead rolls over and pushes below the lows of January, guys, forget it. I don't care. I'm out. I don't care if the Emperor Xerxes of Persia, orders me to kneel before him and worship him, or I don't know, or worship Bitcoin. I'm not going to do it. I don't care, okay? I'm out. That's it. So basically, my preferred scenario, my preferred outlook on Bitcoin at the moment is that this is the start of a bull market. This is the start of a potential bullish rally. But again, I got to mention that cautionary note. For this to be a bull market, we need to see Bitcoin now not failing at this point. It must not fail, and it must push further higher to confirm we are at the start of a bullish rally. Because if Bitcoin does one of these kind of things, where you get an extreme optimism followed by a bounce and then boom, lower again, guys, forget it. I'm out. The cryptocurrency now needs to show to us this is for real. All right. So that means, guys, the lows of 8,200 are now going to be absolutely important. Below this level, I don't care. I'm out.